You're listening to Parasearch Radio, news, views and reviews from the world of the paranormal from across the UK and beyond. Find us on Facebook, Twitter and the World Wide Web. Parasearch UK Radio. Parasearch Radio, broadcasting to the UK and beyond.
The views and opinions expressed by presenters and guests are their own and do not necessarily reflect the official policy or position of Parasearch Radio or its affiliates and sponsors. Listener discretion is advised. Welcome to Haunted Histories with your host Penny G. Morgan, right here on Parasearch Radio.
Well, hello everybody. I hope you're all well and that you're having a good week. Mine's been a bit chaotic, as you can probably tell if you've been keeping an eye on Parasearch. I was at the wonderful Sage Paracon this weekend, covering it on Saturday for Parasearch Radio, and I got to meet all the amazing guests that were there, and a lot of the speaker guests, and also the guests who'd come to meet all the speakers. Some really interesting and fascinating people, and I hope everyone who was there who really enjoyed it, and all the work that MJ and Duncan and everyone else put into it. Yes, it was an amazing event and a real pleasure to be there. Other than that, what have I got coming? Well, would you believe that 4 of the Parasearch presenters are going to be getting interviewed for the Daily Mail and doing a photo shoot in London tomorrow? Yep, 4 of us. We're taking over the world. The world, I tell you. I was very close to doing a Despicable Me impersonation. We're going to steal the moon! You know, similar to that. I'm sleep deprived, I'm sorry. I'm not drunk, I promise. I'm stone cold sober right now. But anyway, so hot-footing it into London tomorrow to meet with some of the other girls to do the photo shoot for the Daily Mail. It should be quite exciting. We've still got the competition running over on the Parasearch group page, so if you want to win 4 copies, 4 back issues of Haunted Magazine, head on over there and like it, put a little message down there, and you'll be in with a chance. So I hope you've been enjoying all the shows on Parasearch this week. You might have heard, if you listened to Kerry Greenaway's Spirit Dimension on Sunday, that was my dulcet tones talking World War One folklore and myths and supernatural type history on there. If you did, I hope you enjoyed it. If you didn't, you can still catch it both on Spreaker and YouTube. And if you go over to YouTube, make sure to click like, share and subscribe so that people know that you enjoy it. But without much further ado, I'm going to get on with that interview that I recorded earlier this week. Have a listen. Okay, and we're now doing our interview on the rise of the phenomena and the history, possibly, of the phenomena of haunted dolls. And I am joined by our good friend to Parasearch, Mr. Gary Bradfield of EAPI. How are you doing, Gary?
Good, fine, thank you, Penny. How's yourself?
I'm good, thank you. I'm very good. It's been a long old week, and it's not really slowing down just yet, but, you know, keeps me busy, stops the grass from growing under my feet, as Kerry keeps telling me that I don't let happen. Keeps me going. So, when you and I were discussing ideas for shows, haunted dolls and sort of haunted objects was one of the things you said you'd really like to look at and sort of delve into the history and delve into the deeper, I suppose, ramifications of them.
Yes.
Why is that?
Well, as you actually know, I mean, I've been doing this experiment, I suppose, with a haunted painting, which has been, I suppose it's been over the course of 1.5 years, 2 years.
Yeah.
And I've been taking this haunted painting to events that the API have been running across the country. I've been getting feedback from the general public, getting them to write down their experiences when they've been touching this haunted painting, and then I basically can sort of shut it off now. I'm not doing it no more, so I thought I did a quick show with Kerry on the haunted paintings side, I suppose, but this is sort of like taking it a stretch further.
Yeah, to the next stage, almost.
Yeah, almost. But it's still bringing, obviously, my experiment into later.
Yeah, okay. Well, with the whole doll side, what I thought I would do is I would, I guess, look into how far back I can trace the phenomena that sort of a lifelike object could be perceived to be carrying some kind of entity. And there's a few things I want to sort of discuss with you to do with this that I've noticed sort of looking at the accounts of them and watching some of the sort of videos on YouTube and everything else. Not all, I hasten to add, because I do know of a few that they're not the case. But what I did find is that they believe a creation of a doll that is someone, for want of a better term, can actually be traced back to the assassination attempt on the last great Egyptian pharaoh, Ramesses III. Because he ruled Egypt from 1187 to 1156 BC. And back in 1156 BC, he had, as the pharaohs did, quite a few wives. I think he had 2 main wives, but quite a lot of minor wives. And it was one of these minor wives, Taya, who decided that it was her son, Pentawere, who should be the next pharaoh. And so her and some of the other sort of associates of the court decided to attempt to assassinate Ramesses III. And to do this, they used poison, but they also created a wax effigy of Ramesses, which they put poison into, they damaged and everything else. And he did die, eventually. He did die, albeit, I think it was more the poison than the effigy. But this, even sort of following that, people believed this doll was haunted by his spirit. And they'd actually managed to put a curse on this doll to hold his spirit so that he did die. Now, obviously, the Egyptians had a lot of beliefs. They had a lot of very sort of I wouldn't say witchcrafty beliefs, but they had a lot of these kind of beliefs, and they had all these rituals that they would do to make sure someone went to the afterlife. And interestingly enough, I was doing some research. This is the problem with research. You probably found this, Gary, because I know you do quite a lot of projects. You start researching one thing that leads you to another, that leads you to another, and you spend easily 8-9 hours researching stuff that's on a direct line to what you initially started, but it just leads you off, doesn't it, in different directions. Would you find that?
Yeah, many a time I've spent when I'm doing events, because obviously we like to go in cold or blind, but after the event and you come back and you're thinking, right, I've now got to do some history research, trying to get the names that we've got associated with the building. And I'm like, for argument's sake, I'll say I'm doing the history on Grisling Hall, and I end up at Edinburgh Castle, and you're thinking, well, how have I managed to get from Grisling Hall in Norfolk to Edinburgh Castle in Scotland?
Yeah, I agree with you. I was talking about Prism Nightclub with Paul Stevenson last week. The sort of chats and the research we took us to Malta and to Jerusalem, because we were talking about the Knights Hospitallers, who had a connection to the site that this nightclub is now on. So it can take you all over the place, and the more you do start to see links before they're there. You kind of can see them coming, almost. But yeah, so Ramesses III, we had a wax image created of him, which is where a lot of sort of people who are interested in the whole haunted doll phenomena think it can actually be traced back to. Interestingly enough, and this is digressing slightly, but there was a mummy discovered not so long ago, and it was in a very, very bland tomb. It had none of the artefacts around it that mummies would normally have had, but they felt it must have been important because of the way the body had been preserved properly. And the current thinking is it is his son, Pentawere, who I think there was 14 people sentenced to death for Ramesses' assassination, and Pentawere was one of them, and he was ordered to commit suicide, which was apparently one of the death sentences they liked to use in ancient Egypt, to actually force them to commit suicide rather than kill them themselves. They had to kill themselves by their own hand because then it was perceived to be a sin. So it really does lead you off in tangents. And the irony is the mummies do look like dolls, don't they? They kind of look like a dried out doll, I suppose, for want of a better term. But then coming forwards a bit, well, there was sort of three probably types of dolls in the olden days, as you could say. There were your poppets. Then poppet was an oldie, worldy spelling of puppet, and it meant small child or doll. And that was predominantly used for folk magic or witchcraft. There was obviously effigies that were created, a bit like the wax Ramesses effigy. And then you had voodoo dolls. All very, very similar to the whole haunted doll concept. But what I have seen just recently is it does seem to be booming, the haunted doll concept. Everyone seems to have a haunted doll at the moment. Why do you think this is?
Hey, I don't. Oh, this is going to be a lot. But I'm going to say it because this is what this show's about. You had the Annabelle, you got the Robert,
mm-hmm.
which you're going to be touching on.
We'll touch on in a minute, yeah.
We're going to be touching on. Annabelle was made into a film, and I'm
mm-hmm.
pretty certain, if memory serves me right, so was Robert.
Mm-hmm.
Now, people have watched them. Now, you go on eBay, the amount of haunted dolls that are on eBay, it's unbelievable.
Yeah.
Me, at the moment, in our present day and time, it looks as if it's a money spinner.
That was actually one of the notes I'd written down to mention. Why are they so expensive? Why don't I just go to I don't know, Smith's toy store or something else, buy a bog standard doll, mash it up a little bit, and sell it for 600 quid on eBay and say it's haunted? Sorry, that's really bad, isn't it? But that's exactly what goes through my mind when I see some of them.
I agree, but you know, I think the reason really truly it's coming more into light is because of Hollywood.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And people seeing money can be made from them. Because if you I mean, as an investigator, if you weren't an investigator, Gary, yeah, if you had a doll in your home that was terrifying you, terrifying your family, you thought it was scratching people, it was causing people to have nasty accidents and everything else, would you, in good conscience, sell it, or would you try and give it to someone like your the haunted magazine and the haunted museum type places, like Haunted Antique Centre or something like that? Would you, if you thought this thing was so dangerous, would you really sell it? Do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, that is a good question. Now you got to think. I've now got to sort of like think in the mindset of I'm not an investigator. I'm just an ordinary person.
Yeah.
Would that, at that moment in time when this is all happening, would that person in time think it's that doll? But if they do say, well, yes, it is that doll, or would I say, yes, it is that doll? Would I then know who to give it to? And then would I, obviously, in my own conscience, would I say, well, here, Penny, have this doll. Look after it. I don't want it. I think I would dig a hole.
Yeah.
And burn it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Because I don't think I could, as a human being,
pass that responsibility on to someone else.
Somebody else.
Yeah. I mean, what I mean is, if you knew someone like, say you've got this doll and you don't know what to do with it, and you're not an investigator, you're not a paranormal person, and you happen to mention to someone as my example, I'd use the school run. A couple of the mums will be chatting to me about stuff, and they then find out that I know a bit about it, and I might know someone who can help them. And I would probably sort of refer them to someone like Neil Packer or someone like that if someone told me about something that was bothering them in that respect. But I just can't get selling something or giving it to a charity shop or whatever if you genuinely, because you would only give it away if you knew you wanted to get it out of your house. If you didn't associate the problems that you were having with that item, you wouldn't get rid of it. But when you see these stories, and there was one I was reading where the doll had been given away, and there was a note with it saying, "We're giving this doll to a charity shop because," and it stated that it was because they felt it had been a negative influence on the house and that it was possessed and everything else. To me, that's quite a callous thing to do. Because it's almost like the chain letters that say, if you don't pass this on, you're going to get whatever. So you send it on to a couple of your friends, think, well, I've done my job, they can deal with the potential curse now. I never understand why people do that unless it is a calculating thing to make money.
I agree. I do agree. But obviously getting down to the fact of, you mentioned in the school run. School run's great because you get so much information.
You do.
I don't do the school run no more because I'm a granddad, so I don't get to do the school run, so I miss out on the school run. But
were you one of those ones standing outside chatting to all the mums?
Yes.
Yeah.
Used to take it in turns when my kids were growing up. Used to take it in turns.
Oh.
So, but yeah. If I didn't know anything, then, as you say, the school run, and then for argument's sake, I'd be talking to you, and you'd go, well, I know so-and-so that's got a haunted museum. Then I would say, okay, I'll wrap it up.
Yeah.
I'll give it to you, but you've got to promise me you give it to the museum.
Yeah.
That's up to you what you do with it afterwards. If you don't want to give it to the museum, then that's up to you.
Yeah, that's up to me because I've offered to take it off their hands as opposed to not knowing what I was taking on. I've got an understanding. And to be fair, the school run, like you say, it's a great thing for information, especially even within the day of social media where you can look up stuff. The amount of times that I'll be chatting to one mum who'll say, oh, I've given your name to that other mum because she's having weird things happen in her house and she wants someone to try and explain it to her and things like that. And a lot of the mums seem to know I either seem to get asked to help with explaining paranormal stuff as best as I can, or helping them with their kids' history homework. It seems to be one or the other.
You go, see.
It's nice to be wanted.
Even if it's to do a kids' history homework.
Help with the kids. Oh, I'm a cow, though. I don't give them the answers. I prompt them where to go to find them, but I don't give them the actual answers. Trying to explain to my 9-year-old over the weekend what a mnemonic was. And without telling him sort of verbatim what it was, trying to explain to him how to create a mnemonic to remember some bits of a story he needed to remember. But anyway, and maths homework, never give them the answer, just try and show them an example of how to do it so they work it out for themselves. But joking aside, it just seems to be that every story at the moment, or every team that wants to get in the papers, has a haunted doll of some description. Whether it's a Raggedy Ann doll, which I'm going to come on to in a second, or whether it's an oldie world. I mean, there was even an episode on Judge Rinder recently about a haunted doll. I don't know if you saw that. Did you see it?
No, I didn't. No.
Okay. It was a case of this guy had sold this doll as a haunted doll deliberately sold it as a haunted doll. It wasn't misadvertised or anything like that to this guy who said that, and I can't remember the name of the doll, somebody might be able to correct me in the chat room, but he'd sold it to this guy who hadn't paid him for it. And the reason he hadn't paid him for it is supposedly the doll had told him not to. That's very easy, isn't it? Yeah, I'm not going to pay you to MOT my car because the spirit of my former car has told me not to pay you. You know, it seemed all very, and you could see Rinder was having trouble keeping his sort of face straight as he was dealing with the case. But even that, you know, that's now starting to happen. Obviously, we've got Lee Steer in his haunted doll. We've got Zach Bagans has got them in his museum, haunted museum. So it does seem to be a classic thing. But looking back, I mean, the first one I'm going to look at is probably the most famous haunted doll of all, in my opinion, and that's Annabelle. Annabelle the Haunted Doll. Have you seen the films that have been really based on Annabelle?
Based on it, yes, I
say
have.
loosely because they're very loosely based.
Yeah, we'll go with the word loosely. Yes, I have.
See, I've never seen them. Never seen them. I mean, the nearest haunted doll thing I've probably seen is Chucky. Child's Play.
Child's Play. No, I must admit, I did see. Well, the trouble is, again, the haunted doll Annabelle Warrens, and it's like a rag doll.
Raggedy doll, yeah. Raggedy Ann doll.
Then, let's put a different spin on. Then you go and watch yet another Hollywood, as I like to call it. Not Hollywood, Hollywood.
I got it. I was with you.
And they decided, oh, this is good. We'll now make a movie called Annabelle.
Yeah.
Well, the Annabelle doll that Hollywood created is completely different to the original.
It is, yeah. The original one is quite an innocent-looking rag-type doll, whereas the Hollywood one, I have seen the pictures of it, is more of almost a scary-faced kind of gaudy makeup, sort of China-type doll, isn't she? And you've also got satanic cults in the film and all of this stuff, which isn't what's supposed to have happened in the real account. Now, the real account, and you might, I've noticed a parallel in when a lot of these stories started to become prevalent. And I'll mention that in a minute. But the real Annabelle, she's the doll herself is in Ed and Lorraine Warren's museum in Connecticut, and apparently back in about 1970, there was two student nurses called Donna and Angie, who were sharing a small apartment together, and Donna's mum had found this doll supposedly in a thrift store, and thought her 19-year-old daughter would like it on her bed, and apparently her 19-year-old daughter was very happy with it, but she noticed that this doll seemed to change its position and move, and some of the movements were getting more and more exaggerated as the time went on. She'd be found in a completely different room to where she'd been left in, or they'd come in and they'd find her sitting with her legs crossed and her arms folded, leaning back in a position she hadn't been in before. And supposedly when they tried to put her into those positions, her body would just flop. It wouldn't hold them. Then they found notes that had been written by her saying "help us" or "help Lou" on old parchment paper, which they didn't have any of in the apartment. They consequently, and the writing was a small child's writing, they consequently called in a medium, I believe it was, who channeled the doll and said it was the spirit of a young girl called Annabelle Higgins, who apparently was found dead at the age of 7 on the land that these apartments had been built on. Plausible-ish, I suppose. A young girl would be attracted to a doll, would want to play with it, would want to associate with if there was a spirit of a young girl on the premises. And as you know as well as I do, she doesn't have to have lived in that apartment. She could have been associated with the land that the apartments are now on. Would you agree? Yeah, that's quite plausible. We've just had that in our... I'm sure you've had that in your experience, time as an investigator. Gary? Hello? Gary, are you there?
Yeah, sorry. Yeah.
Thought I lost you then.
Well, no. The bad thing of doing a recording, and on a morning, postman knocks at the door.
Ah, you just had that. Yeah, I've ignored mine before when they've done that.
Yeah. Well, my postman's very persistent. If he sees me, he'll keep banging, and they'll get the banging through the recording. So.
Oh no. Okay. Well, what I was just saying is that originally this medium came in, assessed this doll, and said she was the spirit of Annabel Higgins, who was 7 years old when she was found dead on the land that these apartments were now built on. And what I was saying is it's very plausible that you could have the spirit of an individual doesn't actually necessarily have to have lived in that building. It can be associated with the land that the building is now on. And what I was saying is, in your experience, I'm sure you found that as well.
I think I would be of many that when we're on location, you call forward spirits, obviously, of building and of the land.
Yeah. So that's plausible. That would have been a plausible explanation to why this doll was so childlike and everything else. That a little girl who had died on the land had found a doll that was fun and wanted to play with, hence putting it into different positions, moving it, and all that kind of thing. Up to that point, I could almost think makes sense. It's not so much the doll's possessed, but there's a spirit that's really attached to that doll as a toy for themselves. That I could understand. That I could think is plausible. But then we get Lou, who was the fiancé of Angie, who kept telling them he thought the doll was evil. Now, the thing that's interesting is these reports are all from the Warrens' records. So I do wonder as to the validity of them. But he apparently said he was asleep one time and he woke up and he's sure he was awake, and he reportedly looked down and saw Annabelle crawling up his legs and then proceeded to start strangling him. At which point he blacked out, went back to sleep, and then woke up in the morning and recounted what had happened to him, although he maintains he wasn't asleep when it happened. We'll talk about that one in a second. He then reckons shortly afterwards he'd gone into the room. They'd heard noises in the apartment. He'd gone into the room where the doll was. Next thing you know, he's got blood coming out of him, and the doll is nearby, and it looks like the doll scratched him. Okay. At that point, they asked the Warrens to take Annabelle away to their museum. Okay, kind of what we were talking about, wasn't it? That if you think you've got something that's evil, you ask someone to take it for you who knows what they're doing. Fine. But then one of the stories that the Warren Museum talks about on its webpage is there was a young man apparently and his girlfriend who'd come to the museum, and the young man was goading Annabelle. And apparently Ed Warren sort of said to him, "You shouldn't do that. You know, something bad's going to happen to you, blah, blah, blah." And this bloke's like, "Yeah, whatever. Ha, ha, ha. No, it's not. I don't believe in all that." And then on the way home, they had a motorbike accident. He died, and she was in and out of hospital for about a year. Now, what would your initial observations of that information be, Gary? As someone who's researched into a haunted painting, as someone who's an experienced paranormal investigator, what would your initial observations of that information be?
That, I certainly wouldn't say... I mean, I would look at it scientifically, obviously. Because that's the way I look at things.
Yeah.
And him leaving the Warrens Museum, going down the road and having a motorbike accident, incident. Personally, like, does me sort of... It's a bit like... how can I... A bit like me now, going to my radio, switching it on, yeah, to a radio station, switching it off, walking down the street, and hit by a car, and killed. Does that then make my radio
Cursed.
haunted? Cursed, haunted.
Yeah.
Sorry, no. That is my opinion, and I'm going to, I'll stick to that.
You see, I'm with you on that, because the other thing that I didn't actually just mention is that this medium said the doll wasn't evil. It was this little girl who was obsessed with this doll, who'd found her and everything. It was the Warrens coming in who said, no, it's not a little girl, it's a demon. It's a demonic entity that's attached to the doll, and it's very, very evil. And I have a bit of an issue with it. Seems to be every single thing that happens, some of these certain groups of people will come in and say, no, it's evil, it's a demonic entity, got to get rid of it, etc., etc. Now, interesting enough, this motorbike accident, I can't find any documented proof of it happening. Considering the fact it was meant to happen in the 1970s, it should have been documented somewhere in a newspaper or something else in the area of Connecticut. Can't find any of that. None of the articles that talk about it mention his or his girlfriend's names. They also don't mention the date that it's meant to have happened. So there is no way to prove it really did happen. And also, if it did happen, the fact that he was sounds like he was quite... I mean, if I went into a museum and I saw someone banging on the glass of an exhibit, yelling obscenities at it, you're going to kind of tag them as a certain type of person, aren't you? Are they the kind of person who rides their motorbike carefully, or is they the kind of person that takes unnecessary risks?
Yeah, they would. I mean, if they've got no respect for, as you say, going into a museum and looking at a museum piece, if they've got no respect for that, have they got respect for life?
Yeah.
They live life on the edge.
Yeah, exactly. That is exactly what I was thinking as I was reading this. Even if it is true, even if this young man did visit the museum and then get killed shortly afterwards, it doesn't necessarily mean it was the doll that sent him off the road. It could have been just that he was a bit irresponsible and lived life on the edge, had no respect for anyone or anything, and was riding like a bit of a dickhead, to be quite honest.
I hope this is going out after 9 o'clock.
It doesn't matter. We had someone effing and blinding on our shows over the weekend at the Sage Paracon. They didn't realise they were on air, and then they were like, oh, what the hell, and carried on. It was, it's the beauty of a podcast. It all says adult warning, adult content, over 18s only. If you're under 18 and you listen to it, then yeah. But yes, it is an after 9 o'clock one. But so my personal view on the Annabelle one is that yes, I think a spirit could have been attracted to the doll. I think that is incredibly plausible. Was it a demon? Demonic entity? I find that hard to believe, because it seems to be everything that Warrens were involved in had to be nasty and nefarious and everything else. And it seemed to me that's a reason to sell tickets to the museum, to see this scary, nasty, haunted doll which has caused people's deaths. Maybe I'm just being a cynic, I don't know.
No, you're not.
No, you don't think I am?
No. Don't get me wrong, okay? There's people out there that...
That what, sorry?
Not worship, but they hang on, or they hang on their every word. They can't hang on, obviously, Ed's word no more, but they used to hang on their every...
Yeah.
Well, yeah, they could be getting EVPs from him now. But they would hang on their every word.
Yeah.
What they said was gospel.
Yeah.
Well, I know, and there's millions of other paranormal investigators out there now. Good though.
Yeah.
We are not professionals.
No.
Sorry, we are not professionals. The paranormal changes every time you go to a location. The paranormal will throw something else up.
Yes. Nobody could be an expert. Nobody can be an expert because you don't know if you're right. You just know you've experienced something that maybe not everyone else. Yeah, this is a conversation I have with anyone who professes to be a paranormal expert. It needs a rain check on it, because you can only be an expert at something if you know the definite answer. And you can't be. You might be a photography expert, yes, but you can't be. Nobody can be a paranormal expert. It's not possible.
I mean, let's get back to the words. Now, my biggest bugbear, I've always said to my members, never take anything personal with you in an event.
Mm-hmm.
Wear your clothing by all means. Got to. But never take any sort of loose chain with pictures of loved ones, pictures of your children. Leave them at home.
Right.
Well, the very first Warren film, where the so-called demon spirit then attacks their daughter.
Yeah.
She's wearing the loosest chain going with a picture of her daughter in it.
Right.
This demon gets hold of it because she loses it when she's crawling through the blooming cellar.
Mm. Yeah.
I mean, and if it's true, we all know how Hollywood likes to embellish stories.
Just a bit.
But if that particular piece was true, why was she wearing that chain with her daughter in it?
Mm.
If she is supposed to be this professional, quote, that's just my opinion.
Yeah.
Sorry.
I mean, I find what the Warrens have done and did interesting to read up on and everything else. It's the bigger picture. But I honestly say I don't follow any one particular investigative form or investigator. They're all very interesting to read up on, whether it's and my mind's just gone completely blank, but even if you're going as looking at things like Houdini research, because a lot of people don't realise he did a lot of paranormal work. Whether you're looking at the Warrens, whether you're looking at Peter Underwood, people like that, all these people, the more you read, the more knowledge you gain, and the more you realise the different perspectives that can be taken on things, and how to question things, and what things maybe not to take at face value, and things to sort of say, well, actually, maybe it could have been this or it could have been that. Which brings me on to the next doll I want to talk about, Robert. Now, again, Robert is in America. He's based at a museum in Key West, I believe, in Florida. And Robert was the doll of one Robert Eugene Otto. And he was bought for Jean, as the child was known, in 1904 by his grandfather, grandfather in Germany. And this doll's it's a very strange looking doll because it's got no face anymore. The paint that was its face is sort of worn off. It's about 40 inches tall, so it's quite a big doll, and it was manufactured by a company called Steiff & Co. Now, Eugene got this doll as a present, and quite early on he used to say that it would make giggling noises, its facial expressions could change. As with all these dolls, supposedly it caused a car accidents, broken bones, people to lose their jobs, divorce, and all those kind of sort of horrible life events. But also, as he was growing up, Jean used to, if something bad happened, or something got broken, or someone was in trouble, Jean would always say it was the doll that made him do it. That he didn't do it himself, it was the doll that made him do it. Jean kept the doll with him all his life until he passed away, and then the doll even stayed in the house, and the person who bought the house tried to look after Robert. And people would come and apologise to Robert if something bad had happened, because they thought maybe it was Robert's influence that had caused something bad to happen, and people apparently still do that now. Now, what it seems to me is it's almost religious iconography, like apologising to a figure that maybe they caused something bad to happen.
A good way of putting it. Really, isn't it?
Yeah.
Thinking about it. I mean, you know, the Christians, they'll go to church, won't they? And they pray and whatever, and they're looking at not an effigy, but a statue of Jesus Christ on the cross, and then they apologise for their wrongdoings via a priest. So yeah, I could see that actually. I've never really thought of it that way, but yeah, I can see that.
Yeah, and it does seem to me as though, I mean, not so much with Annabelle. Annabelle's a bit different. People don't go and apologise to her. But there were accounts of people going specifically to Robert before he got put in the museum. I'll say before he got put in the museum. And if they thought maybe they'd been rude to his owner, excuse me, or done something untoward, and then something nasty happened to them, they would go and apologise to Robert instead of it continuing to happen. Which to me is almost similar to people who, if they've done something naughty, they'll say sort of the devil made them do it, but then be like, oh, God will intervene. And it does seem almost sort of like they need an idol to look up to, and to sort of. I find it quite an interesting one. But what I do also find interesting is the fact that Jean used to blame the doll and say the doll used to make him do stuff, which is almost like kids' imaginary friends. When a kid's, kid gets, I don't know, daubs pseudocreme all over the walls, and then turns around to you and said, so my friend told me to do it, and that's their imaginary friend. It's got a very strong parallel to that as well.
I mean, when you was actually first started talking about Robert the doll, and he was saying the doll giggled, and they go, well, that was the first thing that actually came into my mind, was imaginary friend. He's using the doll as an imaginary friend.
Yeah, and it was quite a big, I mean, it was 40 inches tall, so it was, 3 foot tall. So it would have been almost like a life-size toddler, if not slightly bigger. And the whole imaginary friends concept is quite an interesting one, because I know when I did an interview with Barry Fitzgerald, who's obviously very scientific, does a lot of background work, and he was saying that it's been proven that children see things that as adults we don't in the main, is because their eyes can cover a different spectrum of light to ours as we start to age, and from about the age of 7, their eyes change and they don't have the spectrum that they have up to that point of additional UV and infrared capabilities. And he said, if you think about it, how many children still have imaginary friends past the age of 7 or 8? Well, not many do. The only ones that tend to have them are those that are bullied or abused or whatever. And it does start to make me wonder if those imaginary friends aren't actually, they are spirits who are trying to help that child, and the child can see them because the spectrum of their eyes being so different. Which makes me wonder if Jean was actually abused, which is why he needed this doll.
People do tend to, as you say, does he need the doll as a friend? And because it is, as you've roughly worked out, 3 foot, 3 foot high, roughly.
Yeah.
Is it? Has he now started talking to it as a friend or his brother? And it's the more he's talking to it, the more he's coming around to the concept that this doll is real, and then this doll all suddenly starts giggling and starts talking to him and starts moving. It does go down as I said, when you first mentioned it, it did sound like to me it was an imaginary friend.
Yeah, that's exactly what I thought when I was... And it's interesting that, because we don't know what the brain is really capable of, could it be that because he was almost manifesting these emotions into the doll to make it a playmate for him? I can't remember isn't there a paranormal experiment that was done that actually almost created a spirit by willing it to be there, or something like that? And I think, well, you know, children and stuff are pretty powerful, and you only have to look at poltergeist theory, because isn't one of the theories of poltergeist activity is that it's the sort of the turbulent times that an adolescent is going through manages to create enough energy for a poltergeist to manifest.
Poltergeist is we're going to go down a different tangent. I can see it. Poltergeist is, as you say, it's a turbulent time. It's normally more affected with the female side of children going through the adolescence, because they have to go through the obvious.
Their bodies go through an awful lot
of change, and they can't cope with it. But I mean, boys can't cope with it either. But
no, and there are poltergeists who've been associated with adolescent boys.
Boys, yeah, but it's more to the female side, because of obviously you have your monthly change.
Yeah. But the point I'm making is it's that energy. If a child, which is what they are, can create enough energy for that to latch onto, who's to say a lonely child with a doll, or a lonely, you know, or a spirit that's attached to the doll, like I think in the Annabelle case, who's to say that, say, Jean wasn't so lonely and miserable and everything else, he was able to create enough angst and enough energy to create something that kind of latched itself onto Robert.
Oh dear, coughing well.
Have another drink. Have
another drink. Yeah.
We've only got about 10 minutes to go. You're doing well.
That's fine. You're doing well. Great. Yeah. Keep going.
Yes. So that's my thinking. That I'm dubious that dolls can be possessed in that respect. I think it's more likely it's an attachment than a possession. But I do wonder if some of it is down to the human that had the doll in the first place, who was going through something. Because interestingly, with the Annabelle case, the reports all say that she was bought from a thrift store, so she was used. But then other research I'd read sort of said if you look at what dolls were available in the sort of 1969, 1970, she would have been a brand new manufacture there. So they think that part of the story is inaccurate, that she wasn't a second-hand doll. She was brand new. Which does kind of change things a little bit, because it means that if there was an evil spirit attached to it, it's not necessarily been passed on. Which
and again with your Robert doll, isn't it? Because that was bought from. He was brand new.
Yep, back in 1904. Sorry. So there's something else that I thought when I was reading all these accounts. How come you never read one where the doll is nice? How come every single one has to be nasty and evil and want to hurt people?
People don't like reading about nice, do they? So,
it's the same with haunted paintings. You never read a case of a haunted painting where someone looks in it and feels happy and relaxed and good stuff starts to happen. Every single haunted painting story you read, it's either your house is going to burn down, you're going to have a serious accident, you're going to die if you look at it for too long, or all these kind of things. Is it all just because, as you put it, Horrorwood? Or is it real? Or is it psychological?
My personal getting down to being, you know, with the experiment that I've been doing, that's now finished, I'm going to have to say it's psychological.
Yeah.
Dolls, that is, child has a doll. Oh, the child's lonely, as in the Robert doll. This is, you know, my concept, as in the Robert doll. Child's lonely. He then creates his own little friend. Then all of a sudden, this doll that can't talk, can't move, whatever, starts giggling. You know, that to me is imagination.
Yeah.
Then you can say, well, with the Annabelle doll, gentleman said that he was being strangled by the Annabelle doll. It was crawling up his legs. Well, sorry, my friend. If it happened, it happened. But I'm going to put that down to sleep paralysis.
Exactly. That's exactly what I was going to say. He supposedly in his account, he's very, very sort of, vehement that he was awake, and that he he passed out because of the strangling. I think he was asleep, and he was in a dream state, which made him feel that he was awake, and it was just vivid. That's because there's no mention of any marks on his throat. If you've been strangled to the point where you've passed out, you would have some kind of, I can never pronounce it, petuchae in your eyes. Now, surely his fiancée, who was a student nurse, would have been able to see that. There would have been marks on him. Funnily enough, those cuts that he's supposed to have got from the doll healed within 2 days, and nobody else saw them because they healed so fast.
Well, I cracked. We was up in Edinburgh, as you know. November. We're in November now, aren't we?
We are
Halloween.
November now.
yeah. She said there's a hectic week. We was up there Halloween time, around Halloween time.
Yeah.
Well, we was going through a graveyard, and I cracked my leg because there was a little concrete post.
Yeah.
I cracked my leg, and that bled profusely. Well, that is only now just healing.
Yeah.
Yes. And that is, so sorry.
Yeah, I find the whole thing, I mean, I do believe there could have been, like I said, I'm not saying that there weren't some kind of spirit involvement with these items, but the whole possession thing, it was evil, it's demonic, it wants to hurt people. I find that, if you're an evil spirit and you're going to possess something to hurt someone, you do a Christine and possess a car, surely. Or a knife. Or a gun, wouldn't you?
Yeah.
You couldn't possess a doll.
Yeah. I'm going to really do bad things to you. I'm an evil spirit. I'm going to go into a doll. Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, it doesn't make sense to me. I mean, if I was an evil spirit and I wanted to hurt people, I'd probably possess a car or an aeroplane. Something that I can really hurt someone, rather than just.
Oh yeah, I mean. Why not?
I mean, I do think Christine is one of the best books ever written, but the whole principle of a evil possessed car. But yeah, that's what I would do. I wouldn't possess a doll. I'm going to possess something that's going to hurt. I mean, to be honest, you've had young kids. I'd probably possess a load of Lego, because let's be honest, that does hurt when you tread on it with bare feet.
So you don't have to put a spirit into Lego. That hurts anyway.
Exactly. Exactly. But yeah, if I was the spirit, I'd be moving it so I knew it was exactly where you were going to be, where you had bare feet, like 2 or 3 pieces, just as you got out of bed every day. Things like that. The last story that I found is over in Australia, so I thought I'd, cover a few different places, and this one's called Letter the Doll. Now, again, this is a story from the 1970s, and that does seem to be a parallel, because all 3 of these started hitting the press in the 1970s. Which does seem to be a parallel between most of these original stories. Now, this doll was found in an abandoned house in one of the best named places I've ever heard, Wagga Wagga, in New South Wales, by a man called Kerry Walton. And he was exploring this old abandoned house that was in the street that he used to live in. It is very sort of Stephen King, isn't it, the way it's being described. And he found this old doll under these floorboards, these old dusty floorboards. And he took the doll out, and he said as he took it out, he was sort of getting this real sense of foreboding over himself. And if you Google this doll and have a look at the pictures, it is evil looking, I have to say. It's like a slightly larger version of Punch, from Punch and Judy, if that makes sense. It's that kind of manic puppet kind of face. Anyway, for some reason he decided to take the doll home because he thought it might be worth a bit. And supposedly he put it in the boot of his car and was driving home and pulled over because he thought he heard a child in the boot of his car shouting, "Let me out." And when he stopped, all that was there was the doll Anyway, so he took this doll home. His children didn't want it in their room because they said it was haunted and it would giggle at them and move and everything else. Supposedly, dogs hated it and would try and attack it every time they saw it. So he decided to go to some experts to get it aged and everything. And these experts said it was at least 200 years old. And they believe it had been made as a sort of part of a witchcraft by some Eastern European gypsies because it contained real human hair. And they valued it at like $400 or $500 or something along those lines. But he felt that it was his responsibility to keep it and just sort of try to keep it happy so that letter doesn't do anything nasty to anyone. Now, it's an interesting story, and you can almost I can't do an Eastern European accent, but you can almost understand the letting me out sort of thing of an Eastern European. The fact that 200 years before, in the 1700s, there wasn't really anyone in Australia, let alone burying something in a floorboards of a house. And you know, how many horror stories do people tell of gypsies putting curses on things and all of that? But this doll does look... It's out of all three of them, it's probably the scariest looking.
Yeah. I mean, the old adjective, isn't it, with gypsies?
Pardon?
Knock on your door. It's the old adjective with gypsies, isn't it? You know, yeah. I mean, don't get me wrong, I've known quite a few gypsies, and they've been very nice people. Mm-hmm. But the old adjective is a gypsy lady knocks on the door, and if you don't buy a piece of heather, you're cursed.
Yeah. Yep. So it just seems every part of the story, and it's like it was made with real human hair, and then it infers, well, did they kill someone then to get the human hair? And and the fact the children didn't like it. I remember my sister used to have a doll I didn't like. It scared me. The face scared me. Don't think I ever thought it was haunted, though. And I've had toys that my dogs didn't like when I was younger, that they would growl at. But I never thought they were haunted, though. The dogs didn't like them.
Getting back to those, I mean, my granddaughter, she had two, and they were about 2.5 foot tall, both of them. She loved these dolls.
Yeah.
Oh, I'm gonna do it as she said it. Granddad hates them. There was just something about these dolls.
Yeah.
He would actually come in my house, bring them here because she'd be staying with us. And she'd bring them and she'd put them in strategic places. So, Granddad, when he walks through the door, sees these bloody dolls. Yeah, and they would frighten the bejesus out of me. I hated them.
I can understand it. You didn't think they were haunted, though?
No, I didn't think they were haunted. I just didn't like them.
Yeah.
They were so sort of lifelike. Mm. You looked at them and you expected them to get up and come towards me or walk away.
Yeah.
I just didn't like them.
Yeah. No, I'm with you. I used to have one that was about 2 foot tall that could walk on its own. And
no, that'd do me up like a kipper.
I loved it until it sort of started. The walking mechanism started to fail slightly, so it was like it was hobbling, and then it started to scare. It did look. You know, I'm joking, but it did look possessed the way it would walk. But there's a lot of people who dolls scare them more than clowns, because you know they do seem to be watching you, but that's the whole point of them. They are meant to be lifelike. They are meant to be miniature people. So I would love to do an experiment with a supposedly haunted doll to see if anything happens. But if it is haunted, I don't think it's the doll that's possessed. I think the doll has got an attachment as opposed to being possessed, i.e. there's nothing residing in the doll. There's something that feels the doll's theirs and they want to play with it. That would be my... Little child just wanted to play with it. That's, you know... Mm. Or a child's, this is how I'm perceiving the whole concept.
You know, people will most probably hate me for it, but there you go. It's just a child that's died, passed over, that just wants to carry on playing with it.
Exactly. That's actually exactly what I think.
Or it is a child's imagination. We all know they've got a bigger imagination than what we have.
Yep.
And they're using it as a friend. I mean, let's go back to another one of my granddaughters. I mean, she's out in my back garden, yeah? And she's talking to people as in children, and she's a teacher, yeah? She's calling a register.
Yep.
Now, hang about, was my back garden an old school, and what she could see is all the children running around that have supposedly died, and she's calling out their names.
Could be.
My back garden haunted. No, well, yeah, exactly, it could be, but no, it's not, because I know what my back garden is. My back garden used to be greenhouses.
Right.
So it's her imagination.
Yeah.
We use imagination to grow.
Yes.
As humans, we use our imagination to grow. Sorry if I've upset all your listeners tonight.
Don't worry, because I've got a similar... Although I will play devil's advocate here, that I think children do see things that we don't.
Oh, yeah.
And I have heard my two children having full-blown two-way conversations with one person, and then they've been able to come and tell me stuff that there is no way they could have known. So I do think it's
agree
possible,
with you there.
but I agree with you. There is the imagination in children, because their minds haven't yet told them you shouldn't have an imagination. You should just deal with the present. And it is how they learn. It is how they grow. It's playing dress up. It's arranging all your toys in a row and pretending they're I don't know, whatever they want to pretend that they are. So yes. So I do. No, the haunted doll phenomena, I would love to be proved wrong. I would love someone to prove to me that these dolls can be possessed and everything else. But there's just too much of the same old in all the stories, in my view, for it to be valid, personally.
Quite a few coincidences with each of them.
Yeah. Yeah.
But, and not being funny, but didn't... Someone would most probably say no, they didn't, but years and years ago, there was this letter doll was made. Mm-hmm. I'm sure
in the
dolls...
1700s.
Yeah, I'm sure dolls were actually made with human hair to make them look more realistic.
Well, they couldn't make synthetic hair back in the 1700s. A doll in the 1700s would have been a real that kind of doll, like a proper sort of porcelain type, would have been only really something that the rich could buy, because it wasn't like today where kids had a whole room full of presents and dolls and toys and things. That's
going to be my next one, I think. I'll go out and buy a Barbie doll.
Well, there's no reason why it couldn't be. It doesn't have to be an oldie worldy, cracked, sort of decaying, scary looking doll. It could be a more modern one. I mean, you go back sort of to the 70s, Cindy dolls. They don't make them anymore.
No.
And mine definitely had personalities when I had them. I used to run a riding school with them. I had a riding school in my parents' barn with my dolls, my Cindy dolls.
Exactly. And it's a bit like the boy doll Action Man. How many of your male listeners had Action Men?
Yep.
I did.
Yeah, my husband did.
I had loads of them. And I'd line them up, and I'd pick one up, and he'd be like the general, for argument's sake, and he'd be going, "Okay, lads," and I'd be talking. You push forward, you flank to the left, and I'd pick up another one. "Oh, yeah, yes, sir," and off he'd go, and it's imagination.
Like I say, I think there is a chance that some of these dolls could have a child attached to them who like the toy, who've got attached to the toy. Whether they're evil, I find hard to believe, because why are they always evil? and also the fact that all of these stories seem to come around at the same time, as they are now. All the supposed haunted dolls. I just, yeah. But I'd love to be proved wrong. I'm so sure you would, wouldn't you? If someone said, "Look, I've got proof for you that it can happen. Here is the proof." I'd love to be proved wrong.
I don't think the wife would appreciate it.
What, loads of haunted dolls in the house?
But yeah, I would put it this way: I wouldn't pay for one. But if someone said to me, I had this haunted doll."
Yeah, same here.
Yeah, I would do experiments with it. That doesn't bother me. It would bother the wife. I must admit it.
Yeah, my husband probably wouldn't be too keen on it. He's worried enough I bring stuff home as it is. But, yeah, I'd love to be proved wrong. I'd love to see someone's proper research to prove me wrong. But, so there's a challenge. For anyone listening who is spitting feathers right now that we're saying we don't believe in the haunted doll phenomena, prove us wrong. Prove us wrong. I'd happily read anything that people send through to me, because I'll question it. As long as you've got the answers to my questions. There you go.
Everyone be saying prove us wrong. They say, well, don't just put, well, I've got a haunted doll.
Yeah.
And it scratched me. Penny would like the actual video footage of the doll actually scratching it.
Yeah. I need to see it happening.
Yeah.
I don't just want to see a photo of the scratch afterwards. I want to see a video of the doll moving, because why does no one ever capture the video of the doll moving? Why does no one ever capture the video of the doll's face changing? Why does no one ever have the copy of the paper that they supposedly wrote a note on so that a graphologist can analyse the handwriting? That's what I want to see. Oh, I sound like such a skeptic, Gary, and I'm not. I'm not. I was having this conversation. I'm actually going to be, just as we wrap this up, me and a few of the other presenters are going to be doing an article for the Daily Mail this week on female investigators.
Oh, yeah.
And when I was being interviewed for it, the journalist sort of said to me, would you say you're a skeptic or would you say you're a believer? And I said to her, I'm what I'd call a skelever. And she goes, what do you mean? I said, I'm a skeptical believer. I said, I've got more skeptical the more I've done. Because the more stories you read and the more bits of information you get given, I find you become more skeptical rather than less. But it's because you've seen so many things that have been debunked that you spot them quicker. So I'm not a skeptic. I just want to see proof. Or proof that I can't explain.
I think it's not a matter of being skeptical. It's not a matter of being a believer. If you class yourself as a paranormal investigator, you have to investigate every single possibility.
Mm. Yeah.
Now, as we said, we're going down the verge of haunted dolls, but let's go somewhere else. You do private houses, and they say, "Oh, my house is haunted," and you suddenly start hearing bangs and taps, and you go, "Oh, yeah, it's definitely haunted." Well, you can't call yourself a paranormal investigator because all you've done is listened. You haven't tried to find the source. So you find the source of that makes you then an investigator. That doesn't, and then you say, well, there it is. There, it's the radiators are cooling down.
Yeah.
It doesn't make you a skeptic. It makes you an investigator.
I agree, but yes, I'm yeah. That's why I say I'm an investigator, not a ghost hunter. I'm an investigator because when you can't find the answer to something, that's when you can truly say it's paranormal. It's not normal because nobody can explain it. And as I was saying when I was at Sage this weekend, I was chatting to the guys from Haunted Magazine about it. Paranormal doesn't necessarily have to mean ghosts and ghoulies and haunted dolls and all of that. It just means something that cannot be explained away normally. It's paranormal. So, yeah, I agree with you completely. Well, thank you ever so much for coming on today, Gary.
Went rather quickly.
Pardon?
That went rather quickly,
That's
as it always does.
Mate. It's over an hour. I know. Yeah. I know. If anyone wants to catch up with Gary, go over to the East Anglian Paranormal Investigators page on Facebook. Drop them a message. See the places that they're going to be visiting. I know and I'm not going to mention any of the names, Gary, don't worry, but off air we've been talking about some of the new places that him and his team are looking at getting. So hopefully he'll tell us about those when they get arranged, so that we can look into those as well. And obviously, if anyone's got any questions, you're happy for them to drop you a message on the Facebook page, and you'll get back to them.
Yes. Tickets, if you want tickets and things like that, you go through with, obviously, the wife, Sharon, but she's always tagged. But yeah, you got any messages, love messages, hate messages, death threats, send them to me.
And then we'll put that haunted doll in the post to the person to take care of it. Yeah. All right. Well, thanks ever so much, Gary. Take care. Good luck with all the events you got coming on. So that's been Parasearch's Haunted History Show for tonight on haunted dolls, and do we think they're real, or do we think they're kind of, as Gary put it, something from Horrorwood? Well, you can be the judge. You can be the judge, but I've given you some of the history behind some of them, and I've given you some of the sort of debunking some of the beliefs that's behind some of them, but it's up to you. So don't forget, Parasearch Radio has shows on 5 nights of the week, sometimes even 6 shows, depending on what week it is. You can catch up on all of them on Spreaker or on YouTube, as long as you click like, share and subscribe. I'll be back again next week, but until then, have a good evening, sleep tight, and don't worry too much about things that go bump in the night.
Thank you for listening. Don't forget to join us for more shows throughout the week. Find us on Facebook, Twitter, and the World Wide Web to keep up to date with all the shows right here on Parasearch Radio.